Hey friends, I'm actually re-recording the intro to this video because the first one it just turned out really low energy and kind of boring. And honestly, I was toying with the idea of re-recording the whole video, but I've already spent like way too long working on this thing, and I just want to get it out there. So if there's some low energy parts later in the video, just excuse me. It'll get better later on. Also, I think there might be some audio issues throughout the later video. That's also something I've figured out and fixed, and hopefully those don't happen in the future. But anyways, let's get into it. I'm starting a new video series here because I want to work on creative motivation and sort of getting myself better at actually following through with projects that I start and consistently working on them. And I think something like a video series, even if nobody ends up watching it, is a good way to have a commitment that I have to keep up with and thus actually follow through and put things out there. And the things that I'm going to be putting out there are pretty much all going to be in some way related to, I guess you could call it an overarching world building project. I'm hesitant to call it that, and I think I explained it a little bit later in the video, so I don't need to get into it right now. But I should mention that these videos are entirely unscripted. I mean, I have some notes of topics I want to cover, and I re-record little bits and go back and forth or whatever, but they don't really follow a strong structure. It's just kind of going to be me talking about what's going on in my head and what I've been doing. And what I'm doing here, like the focus of this video, is that I got a calligraphy pen and I wanted to practice using it and sort of understand how to use it and get good at it so I could eventually create some cool, like, in-universe kind of manuscripts or just some cool looking art pieces with it, using like the languages or the scripts or whatever that I've come up with for this quote-unquote world building project, right? Which I think segues really well into a topic I wanted to talk about, which is that the general goals or purpose of this big project, right? And that is I want to world build through mediums, right? Specifically with a focus on in-universe mediums, which I'll get into in a second. But what I mean by this is that I want to do the world building not by writing a novel, because I'm not a novelist. I don't think I'd be good at that, and I don't think it would be the optimal way to get my ideas across, because it's just not something I'm suited to, and I really have no interest in that, right? But I also don't want to just do it and make a bunch of charts and make a bunch of spreadsheets, because I love spreadsheets as much as the next guy, right? But it's just not as interesting to me that way. It seems like it's almost purposeless, right? And what I want to do is world build entirely through art or writing or music, maybe, and I don't want to just do it for the sake of it. I want it to come out in some sort of way. So my goal is to, except for the languages, which I am using Google Sheets for, because some things are just, there's a lot of things I need to keep track of, a lot of logistics going on, and it's just easier that way. But generally speaking, I want it to just sort of be ideas floating around in my head, right? And then I create a piece of art that takes place that's visualizing the world, or I write a story that takes place in the world, and here's where the focus of in-universe stuff comes in. I create an in-universe manuscript, or I create a in-universe folktale or legend or heroic, like, epic poem, either in a constructed, invented language that is within the world, or I quote-unquote translate it into English. But that's sort of how I want to do things, because it allows me to express and give to an audience the ideas that are floating around in my head. And to go a little more into detail about the in-universe manuscripts and stuff like that, one thing that I really like about Tolkien, and I don't want to bring him up too much because, I'm doing my own thing. It's nothing really to do with him, even though, come on. But he sort of looked at it from the angle of, this is a history of England. And so everything that you see here are like real artifacts that have survived to our time that I'm translating to you. So the Red Book of Wedgemarch, for example, was a book written by Bilbo and Frodo Baggins, and that was then translated in what became The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And mine is not like a fictional history of anything, and I don't really want to worry about how it sort of relates to our real world, or who found it, or who translated it, because that's just too much work, and it would just take a lot of the life out of it. So I'm not too worried about that. But I do really like that angle, and I like, as someone who's very into anthropology and history and archaeology and all that kind of things, it just really plays into my interests in a way that makes me really excited about it and makes me want to do it this way. No other real thing I can say about that. This way it all kind of serves a purpose, right? I guess that's the best way to put it. But my favorite part about looking at it from this angle, and if you're going to listen to any part of this video, have it be this part, because this is what I feel like really makes what I'm doing unique and different from the idea of world building that I kind of wanted to distance myself from earlier, is that by doing it this way, I don't need to decide what's real and what's not. Like, I don't need to make the stance that the gods in this world are real, or the gods in this world are not real, or this religion's right and this religion's wrong, because I feel like it makes the world feel less interesting, right? So it's just, and if I write an in-universe epic poem, right? I mean, that's not to say necessarily that something exactly like that happened factually in the real history of the world, right? I mean, look at Beowulf. That shit didn't go down exactly as written, right? I mean, we have enough knowledge of our modern world, I think, to piece that together. And I think doing it this way just adds a lot more nuance and depth into the world. And, different cultures have different explanations for different things. And that's just seems silly to pick one and say that's the truth and the others are all wrong, because who's to say? Even in our world, we don't necessarily know who's right and who's wrong. There's no way to know. So it seems just silly to flatten this fake world down to that level for no reason, really, right? At least that's how it seems to me. It just gives it a more, I feel, diverse and real full feeling world, a world that feels like actually lived in by multiple cultures and people. Anyways, I think it's about time to actually get into what's happening in the video. Took me long enough, right? I got a calligraphy pen and I wanted to practice, and what you can see me here trying to just terribly figure out how to draw, especially at first, they don't exactly have a name yet, but what I'm going to call them now are the runes of the Grey Veils. And that's because they are runes devised by the men of the Grey Veils. And the Grey Veils, you can see them, you should be able to see them here on the map. They're called so because of the Grey Mountains, which are called so because they're sort of in between these other two mountains. And you could say they're in their shadow, perpetually in shadow, and thus the Grey Mountains. And the Grey Veils, because they both share these Grey Mountains, even though they're two different valleys. And this is a very temporary map I just kind of threw together in Photoshop. But, down the line, I would like to do a nice hand-drawn style map. I think that could be really sick, but that's a very big project, and I do not exactly have the facilities or time for that right now. But maybe you'll see that on a later date. Who knows? And this runic alphabet is derived from the script of the giants up in the north, who were the first to invent writing. And maybe here I can insert a image. These giants were some of the first sort of ideas in world building I ever did in this universe. They were sort of their language and their sort of original culture, which is actually drastically different than how I'm sort of envisioning it now, was my first sort of ideas for this larger world. And they live up north, and they are a sort of nomadic, very spiritual people. They start out with like hieroglyphic type, drawings, a very a logography, if you will, where each symbol means a different thing, different word, and then it sort of evolves and it changes, and then sort of halfway through this process, which you can see sort of what I was thinking on this very old paper that I did probably in high school or something like that. I mean, this has been going for a long time. You can see sort of what I was thinking about how a sort of an alphabet could develop from there. from their logography. And halfway through this development, the men sort of saw it, and they turned it into their own alphabet type thing. And you can see in my little notebook there the sort of the runes that they came up with. And I had a specific look in mind. I wanted this specific culture, these men in the Grey Veils, to be very sort of Germanic, right? I wanted them to have a very Germanic vibe. So, yeah, anyways, I'm sort of toying with how far down different tangents and rabbit holes I should go in this series. So if anyone sees this at all and takes interest in this, please leave a comment or provide some. Just let me know if you want to hear more rabbit holes and tangents and getting sidetracked, or if you want to hear less, or whatever. I guess there's not much more to say here. I started out pretty shit, but then I took it to a thicker nib and just sort of wrote out all the letters a couple times. I was trying to a major sort of dilemma I was having was, originally I thought, the main stalk and the horizontal lines could be thick, and then all the sort of angled lines would be thin. That's sort of how I was picturing it. But holding this at a 45-degree angle means only the lines with a positive slope, let's say, are going to be thin, and then the ones with a negative slope are going to be thick. And originally I thought it looked pretty bad, but it just proved so difficult to rotate the stylus and try and get at it from the other angle, and it just didn't seem like it made any sense at all. And it just didn't seem like the people who are actually supposed to be writing this would be doing all that, and at the end of the day, once I got a little better at it, I thought it kind of just looked worse too. So I quickly abandoned that idea, and you can see then sort of at the bottom I was getting a little more confident with it, and I'm starting to actually be really happy with how these are turning out. They are looking... I've grown to love the thick and thin lines. It feels more natural. It feels more realistic. And it just has a cool look to it. I don't know. I just think it looks rad. And that's, the last thing I want to mention is that the ink is very, very thin and gray. And I didn't know how to fix that. And I thought maybe I just need practice. Maybe I just need to get better. Turns out all I needed to do was shake the ink bottle a little bit. Right after I recorded all this, my girlfriend came over and said, maybe you just need to shake it, and shook it, and it came out perfectly, and the lines were deep black, but they weren't bubbling and splotching like you can see happen to me a couple times every time I tried to get too much ink on the thing. And I am just stupid for not figuring that out. Let's be honest. I mean, that's some basic knowledge that I just didn't think to do. But here we are. So yeah, I guess that might be where I'm going to end this one off. Very, very rough for this first one, I know. But trying something new out. Going to see how it goes. And yeah, if anyone's watching this and is interested in learning more, or has any suggestions for how I can make this a little easier on the eye and the ears, feel free to write me a comment. Let me know. But I think that's where I'm going to sign off for this one. Peace and love. Have a great day.